Hello everyone, my name is Luke Eastwood and I'm going to give a talk to you today about Puca, or the Puca as it's called in English. Um, First I tell you a very small bit about myself. Um, I've been living in Ireland for the last 25 years. When I first came here a long time ago, I think in 1991, with my girlfriend who was later my wife. And I ended up moving here. I was born in Scotland, although you can probably tell from my accent that I didn't spend a huge amount of my life there. Um, I have been back a few times since I was there when I was 7 as a child the last time, and then I've been back mainly to Glasgow as an adult a few times. Anyway, so I've been studying Druidry for quite some time. I was started out as a Roman Catholic, and I kind of decided that wasn't for me, so I was looking for something else. I suppose I was interested in Buddhism a lot, and then sort of Vedic culture. I'd always had an interest in sort of Celtic history. But it wasn't until I was probably around 20 odd that I became aware that Druids actually existed still, and I started to learn a bit more about it. I suppose I was about 25 or so when I actually became seriously interested in Druidism. I discovered a book called The Book of Druidry by Ross Nichols, and that really launched me on my path to becoming a Druid. I guess I never really looked back since then. And I found it, I was involved in environmentalism from about, 16, 17, conservation groups and, Greenpeace actions a little later when I lived in London from about the age of 19 onwards. Various other things, Friends of the Earth, Extinction Rebellion, etc., etc. So I found that Druidism really fits very well with my own personal philosophy. Anyway, on my path in Druidism, I've studied particularly sort of the Irish myths and Irish folklore and Druidic practices, etc. And I have, in fact, myself come across the Puca on more than one occasion. So I guess I shall start off with explaining a little bit about what that is before I come on to my own personal experiences with the Puca. Okay, so and Puca, or the Puca, is one of the most well-known fairies or otherworldly creatures. We wouldn't really call it a fairy exactly. Perhaps the Banshee is more well known, but anyway, it's a quite famous. Certainly in Ireland, it is anyway. It's quite a fearsome creature, in fact, and its name in English means hobgoblin, and one of the Irish names for it actually is equivalent to bugbear. Bugbear is sort of not really regarded so much as a mythical creature anymore. It's just more of an annoyance. But in the past, it would have been a sort of a rather scary spiritual, mythical creature that was used to frighten children. Not really anymore, but in the past, that name, bugbear, would have been somewhat frightening towards children. Now, the name for that in Irish, Asquelga, is Puca Nayak. Puca Nayak. That literally means bugbear in Irish. Other names that you'll find associated with the Puca is Puca Nasmare, which is translated roughly as the herald of winter. the reason for that would be that pukas are associated with the destruction of fruit and fairy blasting, and one of the traditions around that is that when you come up to Samhain, or more or less when the berries, the blackberries in particular, are starting to go off and bad, that you shouldn't eat them. And it's interesting here because there's some conflation between, the devil and the puka, depending on who you speak to. Some will say that don't eat the blackberries after Samhain or Halloween because the devil pissed on it, or devil spat on it, or alternatively they'd say that the puka spat on it, the puka urinated on it, or even the puka defecated on them. So there is some sense in this idea of not eating the fruit when it's gone bad. Blackberries are prone to these funny little maggots. Okay, so, and also when they go bad, should they go rotten, it can make you sick. So these kind of wisdom kind of sayings or whatever, they're really not based on anything really crazy. They're actually based on some practicalities. The idea that you could actually become ill. Anyway, so I found it interesting to note that there is this association, or this sort of mixing up of the lore around the devil and around the puka. Of course, there is another name for the puka, which is Puca Mikan, which means it's sort of like a nickname for the devil. It basically means a sort of a horned puka, really. So, I mean, the puka has absolutely nothing to do with Satan or the devil at all, but perhaps because of church influenced, I'm guessing the two have been kind of mixed up at various points in more recent history. Now, the puka is, of course, associated with Samhain, which is very much why you have this association with fruit and this time when everything starts to turn bad. So even today, people would know that you're not supposed to pick blackberries after Halloween. And that tradition probably started with the puka, and then at some point later on it got changed to the devil, and then you got both of these things existing at the same time. It's some confusion about which is correct. I would say obviously the mention of the devil or Satan came at a later point due very much to church influence, and this originally this idea would have been going back into antiquity, probably in the pagan era. Of course, the belief in fairies, the belief in the puka and banshees, etc., is very much a leftover from the pagan times, and something that has continued with people being able to interact with creatures of this nature. Another interesting fact is there's a word Puck, which is very much associated with Puck Fair, but it's also another name for the puka, the Puck. Although the most famous place is Puck Fair in Kilorglan that's associated with this word. But that festival actually has absolutely nothing to do with the puka whatsoever. It famously has a wild goat that's put into a tower and crowned as king for the duration of the festival, which is a bit mean for the poor old goat stuck up there for the bones of a week. Anyway, that association has actually got nothing to do with the puka whatsoever. So generally, you don't hear the word puck used in in that context of the Puca, but that certainly has been the case in the past. Certainly in Ireland, in recent years, there's been a festival at Samhain called the Puca Festival, which is a revival of sort of some of the ancient traditions, particularly surrounding the area of Athboy. And of course, with that particular creature being associated with Samhain, that's probably why the name was chosen. So that's actually become very popular. It's quite a commercial festival in that you have lots of bands and you have comedians and all kinds of events put on. You also have historical and spiritual events, all revolving around the festival of Samhain. So that begins on Halloween on the 31st and lasts for about 3 days. In fact, I've participated in that myself in the past, both in processions up to Clockta, the Hill of Ward, and also in some of the sort of cultural events as well. Anyway, getting back to the Puca itself, there is an interesting tradition of the harvest, particularly coming up to Samhain, in leaving what is known as the Puca share. So when you're harvesting crops from the fields, or apples from an orchard, or whatever it may happen to be, you would leave behind a small amount, which would be an offering, if you like, back to the earth, to the Puca. And one of the things about the Puca, it's very much linked with the land, with the earth itself. So people have described it, the Puca, as an ambivalent fairy. Very much meaning that, how your interactions with it could go one way or the other. It is quite fearsome looking, actually. It's sort of described as a shapeshifter. Got a goblin as well. Of course, one of the translations is hobgoblin. And is often a horned figure as well. So we'll come on to that a little more when I get into my own experiences. So one of the stories around it is linked with Samhain, which is the idea of riding. It's meant to be quite a mischievous creature, although in most cases wouldn't do any great harm to people. The idea being that the Puca would pick somebody up and ride off with them on its back, giving them a sort of really terrifying ordeal, and then return them back to where they started at some point later. This has echoes of the Wild Hunt and such like. The she riding out from mounds in the earth and sort of causing havoc and picking up people and dumping them in strange places and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of parallels there. And there's a few stories in that. One particular story which was made famous by Sean O'Cronin is called An Buccal Bo Agus an Puca, which means that the cowboy, or cow herd, and the Puca. And in this story, he's given spurs as sort of protection, I suppose, and a way of supposedly controlling the Puca. So anyway, he ends up riding on this Puca, and he's got spurs, and he jabs the Puca with the spurs. I think he's thrown off and deposited back where he started. The Puca comes around again and speaks to the boy, and he says, "Oh, have you got those sharp things still?" And the boy says, yes, yeah, I'll ride you with them again. And he says, oh no, I'll not come with you if you've got those sharp things. So he didn't have any more trouble with the Puca sort of whisking him away, because obviously the spurs were a great annoyance to the Puca, and he didn't want to get involved with this lad anymore. So that was quite an interesting story. There's lots of references to that. And some people think that link might be because the spurs generally would have been made out of iron, and you probably are well aware that the spiritual creatures, she are not really very fond of iron. It was a tradition for people to wear an iron pin in their collar or somewhere on their clothing to ward them off. So that idea would make sense to me, in that not only would the spurs be painful to the Puca, probably doesn't like the iron anyway. So that's quite an interesting kind of example of the mischievous side of the Puca. If you annoy them, they can be quite disruptive and aggressive. And also, if you're particularly careless or thoughtless with regard to the land, you might find yourself in a lot of trouble with a Puca, if there's one in the area. They're often able to be helpful. The other side of them being they can be protective. They would protect land, and they can also protect humans. They protect growing things, and they can actually encourage the growth of your fruit and vegetables or whatever. If you have an orchard or any kinds of trees, they can be beneficial to the land. And in many cases, they've been around for a very, very long time, and very much connected with a particular area of land where they live. And they also have been known to actually live in houses too. And you'll find that they have a particular area that they live in, and they will sort of stay there. It may not be connected with a house, or it could be. It could be just a particular piece of woodland or fields, or whatever the case may be. They will be, are not restricted, but they will spend their life, their time within this particular area. So moving on from that, we'll come to some of my own personal experiences in dealing with Pucas. Okay, so the first time I came into contact with the idea of the Puca at all is, well, gosh, I don't suppose it's about 15 odd years ago, maybe more. I can't actually remember exactly. Anyway, I went to visit some friends, a couple in County Cork, and they lived near a place called Castle Puca. I thought, well, that's interesting. At the time, I really didn't know anything about the Puca at all, to be honest. So anyway, it turns out there is actually a castle there at this place called Castle Puca. It's an old Norman castle built in 1380 and had fallen into ruins a long time ago. It was built by the Sinan family and was one of their possessions until, I think, the mid 1600s. It's interesting to note that the poet Edmund Spenser lived very close to the castle, and some of the legends surrounding that may be, be the inspiration of one of his poems, the Puca, or what's referred to as Puck as well as Puca. Anyway, I think the poem is called, if I can say it correctly, Epithalium. I haven't actually read the poem myself. So it's thought that William Shakespeare was inspired by this poem and took the name Puck, which is used in Midsummer Night's Dream, as a result of Edmund Spenser's poem, which itself obviously is inspired by the real Puca that exists in that area. Anyway, this castle is still there. It has been bought actually. A few years ago it was bought and is in the process of being restored at the moment. I don't think anyone is living in it right now, but I imagine when the restoration is completed, people will be living in it, or it might even be open to the public. Although it's not in a particularly easily accessible spot. It's sort of right in the middle of nowhere, to be honest. Anyway, the friends that I went to visit, they live a few miles away from this castle, in like even more remote area near the Ballyhura Mountains. But it's still in this sort of area or townland that's called Castle Puke. So anyway, I stayed the night with them. Had a very nice time, and they had a little dog. I think it was a sort of a terrier of some kind who took a liking to me. So I got on, with the dog. It was enjoying having a bit of attention from me. So anyway, later after I'd gone to bed, I just found myself waking up in the middle of the night, and it was a moonlit night. I don't think it was a full moon or anything, but it was a very bright moon, and you could see very well with the moonlight. So I decided to get up, and I went outside. I was staying in a small chalet that they have, and the dog was there. So I just got into my head to go for a bit of a walk off with the dog. So anyway, I go off into the land. They had quite a bit of land running up near a river. So I followed the dog, and it was quite interesting. The dog seemed to be aware of a presence, and I followed it. I actually found that I could sense a presence myself. I'm not what you call very clairvoyant, in that my eyesight in terms of spiritual experiences of the other world, etc., is quite poor. Although I'm quite clairaudient and clairsentient in that I can often hear things. I hear things from beings in the other world, etc. Or I have a sense or feeling of emotions, or some kind of knowledge or information that will come through to me. But as I said, my eyesight is very, very poor in the spirit world, which is quite odd because I've got almost perfect eyesight in the normal physical world. So it's completely the opposite. Anyway, so I could see that the dog was reacting to something, and I had this funny sensation. I had the feeling that there were creatures around me. So I'm in this field with the dog, and there's quite a lot of trees around and a big hedge. I'd gone over a tiny little wooden bridge, which is more or less a plank really across a stream. And then after some time, the dog ran off, and I thought, well, I'll leave too. But I was unable to leave. Basically, I couldn't find my way back out, and I spent quite some time trying to find where I'd entered this field from, and for the life of me, I just couldn't seem to find my way. And eventually, I'm kind of ended up crashing through briars and bushes, and I found the dog again eventually, and I got back to the chalet and went back to bed. But I ended up a bit scratched up. Anyway, so the next day I spoke to the couple about this and told them what happened, and they both laughed and they said, "Oh well, you've been pooped," Says, "Well, that doesn't happen that many times. Doesn't happen to that many people," and they regarded that as quite a positive thing. That the Puca had sort of had a bit of fun with me, played a bit of a trick on me, and in kind of making me get lost, being unable to find my way, and had somehow sort of, I suppose, tricked me or created some kind of illusion so that I was sort of stuck in the field and unable to escape from it. Of course, I did eventually manage to leave, but so that was quite an enjoyable experience actually. I wasn't so keen on getting scratched with the briars, but overall it was like a very very ethereal, strange experience. It was very otherworldly. There was sort of I remember, there being a bit of a mist, and then sort of this sort of, I don't know how to describe it, strange sort of timeless quality, a sense of being out of time, as if I was somewhere else almost. Anyway, this didn't last a huge amount of time, but when they explained to me, that was the Puca that had done this, it kind of made sense, because I wondered, was I, you would sometimes question yourself whether you just imagine things, but very clearly this wasn't the imagination. This was something that actually happened to me, and they found it very amusing actually. So anyway, that was my first experience with the Puca that lived actually in this area. Okay, so that was my first experience with the Puca. I've since then, read stories about it, and come across it in my studies of pagan culture and sort of Druidism and Irish mythology and history in particular. So, but I didn't actually come into contact with a Puca again until almost exactly about three years ago, I think it is now. Okay, this all happened in a rather unsurprising way. I think it would have been a bit more than 3.5 years ago. Would have been January that myself and my partner bought a little place here in County Kerry. In fact, I'm in the house right now. At the time that we bought it, it was just an absolute ruin on the edge of a field. It had just sort of been abandoned pretty much, to the point that there was ivy and briars growing in through the windows. I think all the windows were smashed actually. There was like a willow tree at the back of the house that was growing in through the window and sort of growing underneath as well. And there were 2 swallows' nests in one of the rooms. So very much nature had started reclaiming this little house. I think it had been unoccupied for around 20 years. So anyway, we decided that it could be saved. So I I had a plan to renovate the house and extend it as well, which took a very long time actually. It took 2.5 years to actually complete that work. So after some time, the sale went through. It would have been sort of the end of the summer. And then I was able to come here and start working on the house. So my initial plan was to come and, live in one of the rooms, one of the bedrooms. I had sort of covered up, the broken window, or at least the broken part, so that the wind and the rain wouldn't come in on me while I was sleeping. It was very, very rough and ready. There was no running water, no electricity, and an absolutely colossal amount of work to do to save this place and do it up. Anyway, I went into the bedroom next door to the one I was in, and I felt a very strange sensation, a strange presence. And particularly in a corner where there was a cupboard, there was this really strange feeling. I could sense something was there, but I didn't actually really know what it was. So I thought maybe it'd be a ghost. It turned out this place was originally a gamekeeper's cottage a long time ago, probably built in the 17 or 1800s originally. Although the original part is actually tiny. It's really literally one wall with a fireplace in it was the original. Since then it had been kind of rebuilt and then a little bit added on to it, and then a second time another room added. So it was still like pretty tiny. You had two smallish bedrooms, a kitchen, and a tiny living room with a very small bathroom off of that. And then the original part of the house was in the middle in the kitchen. So I thought, oh well, maybe it's a ghost, but I kind of felt no, it was something else. I couldn't see anything. And I felt a sort of tremendous hostility, actually, tremendous amount of hostility. Now I had a conversation with my partner about this, who has much better clairaudience and very good clairvoyance as well. She can really see very well in the spirit world, and she's often better at communication than I am. I have had conversations with the she, and deity, and they have appeared to me. But this is generally quite rare, and I would say I'm not particularly skilled in those. And mostly I get impressions and ideas and actual sort of like telepathic communication, you could say. That's mostly what I'm good at. So actually speaking to them sort of and seeing them, I'm not so good at, particularly the seeing. Very, very rarely have I actually seen something in the spirit world. So I asked for her to help me, because knowing her skills were far better than mine, and I could feel the hostility from this presence. I felt, well, we have to do something about this. There's something that doesn't want me here in this house. And of course, I'm going to be staying there for quite some time while I'm doing it up. And I mean, of course, during the winter, I wasn't going to stay there. I stayed in a B&B because it was just too darn cold to carry on sleeping there. But, for a period of, a couple of months at least, I would be just sleeping on a mattress in one of the bedrooms on the floor. Anyway, so she did actually strike up communication with this creature. Okay, and it is indeed a puca. We had a puca living in our house that we'd bought. And when I thought about it, it kind of made sense when you see that this house is actually very old, and also it had just been reclaimed by the natural world pretty much. So the puka felt quite comfortable living in this corner. And this corner, it turns out, actually is sort of a portal, if you like. The puka can come and go from there to anywhere within its sort of domain, if you like. The area, where I live is a very sort of ancient area, and this valley is full of forest, ancient land that's virgin land that's never been built on, and there's a beautiful river running close by. So this is quite an unspoilt part of Ireland that has been sort of just used for farming, and it's been woodland for thousands of years. In fact, there's ancient monuments, stone circles, and standing stones still in the area where I live. So this puka, it turned out, has a name, and it's actually been here for thousands of years, according to my partner's conversations with him. I actually have managed to converse with him as well, with some difficulty. So the puka was very, very wary of me, wondering what I was doing there. And so we had to try to explain to the puka that we'd bought this place, and that the puka didn't really have any understanding of the concept of ownership and of money. So I had to think of how we could couch this in terms that would make sense. So I said, well, I'm going to be living here, and my partner is going to be living here too, because we've come to live in this house, in this place, and we're going to repair it. And we have also we're going to be living on this land here, and I wanted to make a negotiation with the puka. So I said that if the puka was happy to let us live here, that we would look after the house, we would look after the land, and we would plant lots of trees and plants and protect the land. So the puka was, I guess, willing to give us a chance, is basically how it turned out. So the puka is of an immense age, and his responsibility, he's a guardian of the locality. So to him, who are these strange humans that have come back here after however long, and wanting to take over the place. Interestingly, not only were there swallows, there was also a beehive in the ceiling, actually, in that room. So yeah, that didn't actually surprise me, actually, in the end, after having discovered the puka was, and the swallows. So yeah, that's just not really that big a surprise. I managed to arrange a local beekeeper to come and take these bees away without much loss. I think there was maybe possibly 50 or 100 bees that got left behind, and they all died, unfortunately. But the bulk of this, the queen and most of her workers were successfully taken away and rehoused somewhere else, which I'm delighted about. So the puka carried on living in the house, coming and going. I could feel it coming and going, feel its presence when it was there. And I would try and talk to it and explain what my plans were. I can remember actually having a conversation with my partner who wasn't there. I was sitting in the living room, sitting on a metal stool, and I had a conversation about trees, and we decided that we had no choice but to take out this willow tree which was growing right next to the house and undermining it as well, the roots. Anyway, at this point during the conversation, when I talked about taking this tree down, all of a sudden the metal stool flew out from underneath me. I landed on my arse, and the metal stool flew across the room and hit the wall, and it was broken. It was bent so that you couldn't use it anymore. Luckily, I had actually a wooden chair which was in the house already, but it was very, very obvious to me that this was a warning from the puka. Okay, it's a very, very powerful, large puka, about 8 or 9 foot tall, and he's kind of like horny, quite formidable, scary looking actually. I don't know if you've seen the film Pan's Labyrinth. There's a creature that appears to the girl there. It looks somewhat like that, but bigger and a lot more imposing and quite scary actually. Anyway, yeah, I was quite shocked by this. The puka could, very clearly, powerfully manifest itself in this physical realm, and it could have killed me if it wanted to. It did what it did as a warning to me when I mentioned about chopping down this willow tree. So I had to explain to him that in order to fix the house, that would be necessary. I didn't have any choice, and that I would plant loads and loads and loads of trees to replace everything that I would have to do, and I would take out the minimum number. In the end, I ended up making a blood pact, even because the puka is very suspicious of me and what I was doing. So I actually spilt a bit of my own blood, and I made an oath, I suppose a blood oath with the puka, that if the puka would look after us, allow us to stay here peacefully and relatively undisturbed, that we would protect the land, that we plant lots of trees. And I said, well, look, if I break my promise, then obviously you can do what you want to, punish me for breaking this promise. So that placated him. He understood that I would have to remove some trees, but I would plant a lot more. So initially I planted around, it's probably about 400 to 500 trees around the perimeter, kind of hawthorn and blackthorn, and a few other, the odd oak tree and birch tree, etc. So that was the start, and then I planted about 50 fruit trees as well, and then I continued to plant more, and sown lots of wildflowers, etc. I've started growing vegetables as well. But the point is that I think the puka was worried that I was going to desecrate the land, defile the place, and he was very serious about not allowing me to do that. And I think what's happened is I managed to gain the puka's trust. I have had conversations with him. He doesn't say a whole lot. It's mostly me explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so far, so good. I think he understands that I'm not here to cause harm, that this is just our home, and that we're only here for a while, for the duration of our lives probably, and that we actually want to look after the land and improve the land. And so we have this agreement, and he tolerates us. He can come and go. I made it clear that he can come in the house. We're only here, we're only custodians. He continues to be the guardian of the land and the house and everything in this area that belongs to, I suppose, I don't know if it belongs to him in an actual sense. He probably wouldn't actually understand that concept. But he is part of the land, and the land is part of him, I suppose. And that connection will be there for however long he lives. So we kind of came along and created a disturbance in, what was the norm for him. And I think in its history it hasn't been hugely occupied, this place. It's been empty quite a lot of its time. So it's no great surprise that he would have been in the house, although we were greatly surprised to discover him. And he's quite a powerful figure and quite a good person, or rather good creature to have as an ally, not a good creature to have as your enemy. Absolutely not. I can imagine this Puca could do immense harm to people, and probably, I'm sure he could have killed me if he'd wanted to. Anyway, so that's really the story of what's happened. We made this agreement, and I am doing my absolute utmost to uphold my end of the bargain, and his own will only end of the bargain is just to allow us to live here peacefully. And I did ask him that if it's possible, if we have any difficulties or problems, that he might help to protect us, in our role of protecting the land, that he would protect us too, because we have the same intention as he has, is to protect and serve the land that we live on. So that seems to be all working out nicely. We just have to remember to respect the agreement we've made and fulfill our promise, for the rest of the time that we live here. Which, I'm not intending to move anywhere else, so I'll probably be carried out of here in a box. So that basically means for the rest of my life. Okay, so that's Ancestral, the story. I'm coming up to the end of this now, but really I think there's something to be learned here, and that is really that these kind of creatures are not to be taken lightly. And this kind of misconception people have about Elshi, or the fairies, of these sort of Victorian view of these sort of cute little creatures, the Tinkerbell type idea. The reality of these creatures that are connected with the land is they are not soft, they are not stupid, and many of them are extremely ancient. And they've been here maybe before humans were here. They've certainly been here during the time that humans have lived in this country. And, I imagine other countries have similar beings, which are tied to land, spirits of the land. And I would like to warn people, do not treat these creatures with disrespect. Do not ignore them. And if they communicate with you, for some reason, take it seriously. Because I'd say in general, the Shi they don't really like humans. They don't like what we've done to this planet. They don't like our noisiness. They don't like sort of disturbances that we create. All this of digging up places and putting down tarmac and, chopping down trees and using weed killer everywhere, etc., etc. To them, this kind of behaviour, which is quite commonplace, it's extremely offensive and disruptive, and it angers them, and it also scares them. I think they feel under threat because they need the wild places. They need the connection with the land, which gets destroyed when you kind of dig it all up and start desecrating it. Then that destroys their connection. It destroys them even. So if they are communicating with you, then it's usually for a good reason, and you do not want upset them at your peril, because if you disrespect them, you're probably going to suffer some consequences. And you should probably feel privileged that if they even bother with you at all, because in most cases they don't really want to interact with humans. I think in my case this happened really purely because I invaded the territory of this Puca. And you'll find that if you move, or you visit ancient places, you'll possibly come across spirits, and to them we're just passing through. As I said, this Puca had been here for a very, very long time, going back into the ancient past, well back into the pagan era, and I'm only here for a blip in this creature's lifetime. So I learned very quickly that there would be consequences if I wasn't respectful. And I would say to you, if you have dealings with the Puca especially, and any of the Shi, be careful, be respectful, and do not ignore, disregard whatever messages they have for you, because they will punish you if you don't pay them their due respect. I would say, generally speaking, it's probably not a good idea to go looking for them. They aren't toys. They are real creatures, and they have their own existence, their own purpose in life. They're not here for our entertainment. Okay, so if you do run into them, you can have positive, good interactions with them if you treat them in the right way and with due respect. They are not necessarily hostile. They are only hostile if they feel under threat. Apart from, there are a few malevolent creatures, but I won't go into that. But in general, the hostility is as a result of human stupidity and carelessness. They're not inclined to sort of attack us or play tricks on us for no reason. So anyway, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope this gives you a better understanding of the Puca, and that this is very much a creature that has significant power and abilities, and is not to be messed with lightly. I would recommend a very respectful and sort of humble attitude towards it, if I were you, if you do ever come across one. Okay. Finally, I'd just like to say, if you're interested in my work, you can find more about me at my own website, which is lukeeastwood.com. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found that informative and enjoyable.